The Socialist Spice Girls are none too pleased with the prospect of compromise by the White House with House Republicans on a debt ceiling raise, a compromise that could include any reduction in spending, could include any work requirement for public support programs. Two of the leading lights of the left and bandmates, Socialist Spice Girls, Pramila Jayapal, who's the Socialist Spice Girls manager, and, of course, the star, the front girl, AOC. Take a listen.
I think there would be a huge backlash from our entire House Democratic, caucus, certainly the progressives, but also in the streets. I think that it's important that we don't take steps back from the very strong agenda that the president himself shepherded and led over the last 2 years.
But if the president agrees to spending caps, or if he agrees to work requirements on certain social safety net programs,
it's going to be a problem. We do not legislate through the debt ceiling for this very reason.
All right, you heard it from Jayapal in particular, taking it to the streets. You put a work requirement on welfare, we are taking it to the streets. Summer of Love Redux.
Can't wait to see that.
For more on this, pleased to be joined by Steve Moore, economist, GovZilla author. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
Good morning, guys. And by the way, I love this. The fact that what's her name again? I can never pronounce that name.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
You mean AOC?
Oh, the other one, Pramila Jayapal. Yeah.
No, the one who said we're taking it to the street.
Yeah, Representative Jayapal. Yeah.
I mean, here's what's so ironic about this. All the oh my God, these terrorist tactics by the Republicans. I think the Democrats are pretty good at terrorist tactics when they say they're going to, take to the streets and start, obviously, rioting and getting violent if they don't get their way. Incidentally, there was another development by one of the squad members. Again, I can't keep track of all these people. There's so many crazies in the House. Who was saying, "Hey, wait a minute." Oh, Rosa DeLauro. She said.
Yeah.
The one thing that Biden has agreed to, which is a layup, right? It's a no-brainer to basically say unspent COVID money, Amy. The money that there's almost $100 billion that was authorized that we didn't have to spend because after all, COVID.
No. More like $500 billion.
Oh well, is it $500 billion?
Yeah.
The first year. Okay. Well, anyway, she's saying that she doesn't want to. She says no. We should spend that. And that's the only concession that Biden has made. We shouldn't spend unspent COVID money, which is, I used the analogy in our hotline today. That'd be like in 2002 saying, we have to spend money on the Y2K problem.
Oh, I remember that. Remember that scare? It never happened. What about giving the $500 billion back to the Treasury? Wouldn't that just make sense and be a simple solution?
Well, it's not a solution.
Of course that's the solution. You don't spend... They treat this all like it's a cookie jar, and they can just raid anytime they want. And so, look, they're not close right now. And, the polls are now showing 75% of Americans want either a debt ceiling extension that, cuts spending, or, there's 20% of Americans don't want to raise the debt ceiling at all. They're not buying this chicken little, oh, my God, the world's going to come to an end if we don't raise the debt ceiling. And by the way, I want to make this very clear to your listeners. I want to say this loud and clear because you've been lied to, folks, for the last 2 months. There will be no default on the debt. Let me say that again. There will be no default on the debt. By the way, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution prohibits any default on the debt. The 14th Amendment says that the debt must be honored. That means if you own a bond, it must be paid. So if we don't reach an agreement, it's not that we're going to default on the debt. What scares the bejesus out of the liberals is we might have to shut down the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Energy, and some of the foreign aid payments for a few months. I don't know, Dan. I can live with that.
Yeah, so the temporary shutdown of permanent government. Yes, right. It's very tragic. But I can hear the chants in the streets now. What do we want? To spend unspent COVID money. When do we want to do it? Right now. That's
Si se puede.
That's a rallying cry. Okay. Well, so how do
it's going to collapse. the whole healthcare system will collapse, according to Rosa DeLauro, unless we spend. By the way, I thought it was closer to $100 billion. You're saying it's $500 billion, so I'm going to have to check those numbers. But still, $100 billion, $500 billion is still a whole hell of a lot of money. And now look, the other thing is on these welfare payments, reform. This is something that, passed in a bipartisan way in 1996, was a gigantic success. What happened when Obama was president and then further under Biden during COVID is we got rid of the work requirements. That's why it's so hard for businesses to find workers. So Republicans are simply saying, you know what, if you're going to get food stamps, if you're going to get public housing, if you're going to get, Medicaid free health care, you got to work 20 hours a week. By the way, 20 hours a week, Amy. I think you and I, most people listening to this show, are working a whole hell of a lot more than 20 hours a week.
I know it's not a big ask, but isn't it also 20 hours a week or 20 hours of schooling?
Yeah, or schooling, exactly. So it's not like it's, oh, my God, this is like, concentration camps.
By the way, the specifics on this, and I'm citing Dr. Joel Zinberg, who we talked to about this. He had a piece in the Wall Street Journal. More than 2 years after all of the money that was drop shipped around the country, $444 billion of the total remains unspent. More than $114 billion hasn't even been obligated. So there's $114 billion that's unobligated. There's $440 billion that is unspent. Wow. I would go for the larger number, wouldn't you?
I would too, and that's $500 billion, folks. They want to spend, on just their wish list of programs. When look, we're going broke this year alone. This year, we will borrow close to $2 trillion. Biden's been running. You recall that in recent months he was saying, "I've reduced the deficit more than any other president." What is he talking about? We're looking at another $2 trillion deficit this year. These numbers, and look, I'm not a debt phobe. I'm not someone who thinks debt is going to destroy things. But once you get debt as high as we have it right now, when I came to Washington, the national debt. And now I've been in D.C. a long time, 1985. We had about a $2 trillion debt. Now we have a $32 trillion debt, headed to $52 trillion.
Right, debt becomes a problem when you can't service it, and that's where we're getting to. Yeah right.
It becomes a number when you can't even count the zeros.
Yes, right. I wanted to get your reaction to where we are on the fighting inflation. And Don Luskin writes in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about this. And he's saying, and Luskin is, he's a smart guy, and he's actually a Friedman acolyte, Milton, that is. Yeah. He writes, my worry is not inflation anymore. We already hit peak inflation, and we're down by half over where we were last year. My worry is deflation. He writes that. One might argue that after so much inflation, a little deflation wouldn't be so bad, but economists usually see deflation as a greater threat because it's easy for consumers simply to stop spending when they expect prices to fall, and that vicious circle causes recessions. He's saying that the Fed, the real reduction in the money supply combined with interest rates is pushing us into a deflationary environment in the next 12 months.
I'm kind of in the middle on that. I don't see deflation. We still officially have a consumer price index that's been rising at 5%. So, that's a long way from the 2% Fed inflation target, and it's even further away from, when you have deflation, you have negative price increases. I don't think we're near that right now. But I agree with his fundamental point that inflation is coming down. No question about it. I like to look at the commodities index. I'm not just a monetarist. I don't just look at the amount of money in the economy. That's what Don's talking about. I also like to look at what's happening to the lead indicators on prices, like what's the price of oil, what's the price of cotton and copper and those things, because you can get every minute you can go on your computer right now and find out what's happening to the change in the prices of those things. And they've been, they've been falling a little bit in price, which means I think we're going to see inflation head down to maybe 3 or 4%. I don't think we're going to go negative. But my bigger worry, Dan and Amy, is the economy is slowing down. I mean, look at the housing market. It's come to a screeching halt. There was a new study that came out that 80% of Americans now think this is a bad time to buy a house. That's the highest number they've seen in 50 years.
Well, yeah, because the mortgage rates are, the 30-year fix
is
out of its mind.
Right.
It's like 7 or 8%.
Exactly.
Well, but here's the thing. But that's what Luskin is talking about. He's essentially saying the Fed is fighting the last war, which is what government always does. And these mystics at the Fed, they overreacted on inflation, and now they overreacted on quantitative easing for a decade. Then they're overreacting on inflation, and these wild swings from one direction to the other, when the Fed should be in the business, as Vivek Ramaswamy has said, of just stabilizing the dollar, rather than these wild swings based on them trying to guess how long the lags are.
That's what I said when I was nominated to be on the Fed, and of course, all Washington went berserk because they you got to understand these people. They're like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They love to push this lever and that lever and have control. It's about controlling the economy, and they think they're so smart because they went to MIT and they went to Harvard and Yale, so they know what's good for us. Oh, push this, So these are the same people. I've told this story before, but I'll say it again. There were 11 Nobel Prize winning economists who, when Biden came in with his $6 trillion spending spree, wrote in the New York Times, "Don't worry, this won't cause inflation."
Right.
And inflation went to 9%. So who do you believe? You believe me, because I'm the best economist out. No, but my point is, I do think that inflation is coming down, thank God, but I am worried about this economy really crashing, and that's why I think this debt, people should be paying attention to this, because if we can get spending down, I think that's the most important thing. Speaking of Milton Friedman, whenever I asked him, because I knew him when he was alive in his later years, I'd always say, what's the best thing we can do to grow the economy? You know what he said, Dan?
What?
Cut government spending. Government spending is not a stimulus, it's a de-stimulus.
Right.
It's like taking
crowding out private activity. Right, of course.
Yeah.
Fundamentals.
Yep.
Steve Moore, economist, best around, he says.
Wait, I got to tell him what happened. Our high school played your high school last night in boys volleyball.
New Trier versus Allman Brothers.
In what sport?
Boys volleyball. And I have to tell you, your team
we won! New Trier won!
Okay, relax. They did call a timeout in the second set when we made a comeback, but the players at New Trier were lovely, well-behaved gentlemen. The coach was great, and
well, that's not a fun story.
Well, no. What makes it fun is that we block them, but with one. I'm just going to call him Big T. He has 100 blocks, 5th in the state of Illinois, number 1 in Chicago Public's Gold League. So good for him. And my son just destroyed. He had the best game of his life yesterday. He had
Fantastic.
6 kills.
Congratulations! By the way, one last thing on the way up.
Yeah. And by the way, how do you know? How do you know what's happening with boys volleyball at New Trier, Steve Moore?
He knows now.
Because I follow this stuff every day. One last thing on the way out, just so you guys know. The
economics of boys volleyball.
The new census data came out on population of cities. Here is an amazing statistic. You can look this up. Did you know that 100 years ago, Chicago had a higher population than it does today?
Yeah, I did
believe that.
Yeah,
isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, you are ruining one of the greatest cities on the planet.
Well, manufacturing jobs are out. Now everything's out. Every big corporation.
And 100 years from now, Arlington, Virginia is going to have a higher population than Chicago does today. Steve Moore, Wall Street, economist and GovZilla author. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Have a great week. Take care.
Thanks. You too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. Your business and your money are in good hands with Signature Bank. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hi,